The mortarboard fell from my head as my father's words sliced through the graduation ceremony's ambient noise. "You're dead to us," he hissed, my mother nodding beside him, her lips pressed into a thin line of disgust. I stood frozen in my black polyester gown, diploma clutched in sweaty fingers, as they turned and walked away through the crowd of celebrating families. The happiest day of my academic life shattered into fragments sharp enough to draw blood. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Emma Prescott. I'm 24 years old, and I spent 4 years paying for my parents' mortgage while they pretended I didn't exist. This is the story of how I reclaimed my life from people who never wanted me to have one in the first place. I didn't cry at graduation. Not when my roommates found me standing alone by the engineering building. Not when Professor Harlow asked where my family was. Not even when I returned to my empty apartment and hung my graduation gown in the closet, where it would remain untouched for years. Instead, I methodically removed my cap, carefully placed my diploma on the kitchen counter, and opened my laptop. The banking app glowed in the growing darkness of my apartment. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I stared at the automatic transfer that had been draining my account every month since freshman year. $1. $450. To Prescott Mortgage. The same mortgage I'd been paying since my 18th birthday, when my father had made it clear that my education would come at a price. "You want college? Fine. But you'll pay the mortgage while you're gone. It's only fair. We raised you, housed you, fed you. Now it's your turn." I'd agreed because I'd had no choice. No mortgage payments, no college fund access. And without that fund, painstakingly built by my grandparents before they passed, there would be no engineering degree, no escape from the suffocating smallness of their expectations. 4 years of ramen noodles and overnight shifts at the campus security desk. 4 years of declining social invitations because I couldn't afford a pizza, let alone a weekend trip. 4 years of watching my classmates accept parental support while mine demanded tribute for the crime of wanting more than they had given me. And now, on what should have been my proudest day, they'd finally said aloud what they'd been demonstrating for years. I was nothing to them. Less than nothing. A failure. Despite the magna cum laude distinction on the diploma lying on my counter, I should have felt devastated. Instead, I felt something unexpected stirring beneath my ribs. Relief. The crushing weight of their conditional love had finally been named, acknowledged, made real. And in naming it, they'd set me free. The cursor blinked at me from the screen. With 3 clicks, I could cancel the automatic transfer. With 3 clicks, I could stop paying for a house I wasn't welcome in. With 3 clicks, I could begin to build my own life instead of financing theirs. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I didn't click that night. I closed the laptop and went to bed, letting the familiar rhythm of obligation carry me through one more day. But something had shifted. For the first time in my life, I allowed myself to consider a radical possibility. What if I stopped disappearing to make them comfortable? The job offer had arrived 2 weeks before graduation. Westbrook Engineering, starting salary $78,000, with benefits and relocation assistance. I had accepted immediately, knowing it was my ticket to independence. My parents hadn't asked about my plans after graduation. They hadn't asked about anything in years, except whether the mortgage payment would be on time. I spent the week after graduation packing, sorting through 4 years of accumulated textbooks, notes, and the few personal items I'd collected. My life fit into 6 boxes and 2 suitcases. It seemed both pathetic and liberating. The apartment I'd rented in Phoenix was small but mine. The relocation money covered the security deposit and first month's rent. The salary would cover everything else, including, out of habit, my parents' mortgage. June passed in a blur of new employee orientation, setting up utilities, and learning to navigate a city where no one knew me as the Prescotts' strange, ambitious daughter. I made the mortgage payment automatically, without conscious thought. July's payment too. It wasn't until August that I really looked at my bank statement and realized what I was doing. I was sitting at my new IKEA desk in my new apartment, reviewing my budget for the month, when the line item jumped out at me. $1, $450. Transferred on the 1st, as always. Almost 20% of my take-home pay, gone to people who had declared me dead to them. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my text messages. Nothing from my parents since before graduation. No calls, no emails, not even a request for the money I continued to send. I was fulfilling my obligation to ghosts. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, trying to understand the paralysis that kept me making those payments. It wasn't love. Whatever fragile love had existed between us had withered long ago. It wasn't fear. What more could they take from me? They'd already rejected my existence. It wasn't even habit. 3 months wasn't long enough to cement a financial decision that significant. It was guilt. The insidious, bone-deep guilt they'd cultivated in me since childhood. The unshakable belief that I owed them for the basic fact of my existence. "We gave up everything for you," my mother would say whenever I expressed a desire that inconvenienced her. "We sacrificed our dreams so you could have a roof over your head." I'd never questioned it. Never asked why having a child they'd planned for, had supposedly wanted, was framed as a sacrifice rather than a choice. Never wondered why my achievements were met with resentment rather than pride. By morning, something had crystallized within me, a clarity as sharp and sudden as their rejection had been. I took out a notebook and began to write, not with emotion, but with the precise, analytical mind that had earned me my engineering degree. First, I listed every financial transaction between my parents and me since my 18th birthday. The college fund, $62,000, left by my grandparents specifically for my education. The mortgage payments, $1, $450 monthly for 48 months, totaling $69,600. The math was simple, devastating. I had already paid them $7,600 more than the entire value of my college fund. Next, I calculated what those mortgage payments had cost me beyond their dollar value. The internships I'd declined because they were unpaid. The networking events I'd skipped because I couldn't afford professional attire. The study abroad opportunity I'd passed on because I couldn't manage both international housing costs and the mortgage. The cumulative impact on my career trajectory, my professional connections, my educational experience, incalculable. Finally, I wrote down what I would gain by stopping payments. Financial freedom, an emergency fund, the ability to save for my own home someday, professional development opportunities, perhaps most importantly, the chance to rebuild my sense of self-worth outside the warped mirror of their expectations. I closed the notebook and opened my laptop. 3 clicks. That's all it would take. Cancel automatic payment. Confirm cancellation. Return to account summary. My finger hovered over the mouse. I thought of my father's face at graduation, the contempt in his eyes, as he delivered his verdict. I thought of my mother, silent beside him, complicit in his cruelty. I thought of all the ways they had taught me to make myself smaller, to accommodate their insecurities. I clicked. The confirmation screen appeared. "Are you sure you want to cancel this automatic payment?" I clicked again. "Your automatic payment to Prescott Mortgage has been canceled." One final click returned me to my account summary. The screen looked exactly the same, but everything had changed. For the first time in my adult life, my income was fully my own. The realization didn't bring the anxiety I'd expected. Instead, I felt lighter, as if I'd set down a burden I'd been carrying so long, I'd forgotten it wasn't part of me. I closed the laptop and went to work. 3 weeks passed without a word from my parents. I threw myself into my new job, embracing the challenges of real-world engineering problems. I made tentative friendships with coworkers. I bought a plant for my apartment, a small act of permanence, of putting down roots. Then, on a Tuesday evening in September, my phone lit up with my father's name. I stared at it, heart hammering before answering. "Hello? The mortgage payment is late." His voice was cold, matter of fact, no greeting, no acknowledgement of the months of silence. I took a deep breath. "I know." "Well? When are you sending it?" "I'm not." The silence that followed was so complete I thought he might have hung up. Then, "What did you say?" "I'm not paying your mortgage anymore." My voice was steadier than I'd expected, calm and clear. "You ungrateful," he sputtered. "After everything we've done for you? This is how you repay us?" "I've already repaid you. $69,600 over 4 years. That's $7, $600 more than the college fund Grandma and Grandpa left me. That money was in our name. We could have used it for anything. But you didn't. You used it for my education, which was what they intended. And in return, I've paid your mortgage for 4 years. That was our agreement. The agreement is over. You can't just... You said I was dead to you, I interrupted, surprising myself with the steady anger in my voice. At graduation, you both walked away and left me standing there alone. Dead people don't pay mortgages, Dad. Another silence, this one charged with something I couldn't name. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, shifting from outrage to the manipulative reasonableness I knew so well. Your mother and I were upset. You know how emotional she gets. We didn't mean it literally. You meant it enough not to contact me for 3 months. We were giving you space, he said, the lie transparent even through the phone. We thought you needed time to think about your choices. My choices? I echoed, genuinely confused. The job. Moving across the country without discussing it with us. Making these decisions without considering how they would affect your family. And there it was. The real offense. Not that I'd stopped paying their mortgage, but that I'd made a decision that centered my needs instead of theirs. That I'd chosen myself. I'm sorry you're having trouble with the mortgage, I said, surprised to find I actually meant it. Not because I felt responsible, but because financial insecurity was genuinely stressful, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But I've been paying it for 4 years while putting myself through college. If I could manage it on a student budget, I'm sure you can figure it out with 2 full-time incomes. This isn't over, he said, his voice hardening again. Your mother is devastated. Is that what you wanted? To break her heart? The guilt rose automatically, a programmed response to his manipulative trigger, but this time, I recognized it for what it was. A trained reaction, not a truth. I let it wash over me without taking root. I didn't want any of this, I said quietly. I just wanted parents who were proud of me, who supported me, who loved me without conditions. We have always loved you, he insisted, but the words rang hollow. Goodbye, Dad. I ended the call before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but not with fear or regret. With a trembling awareness that I had just crossed a threshold I could never uncross. I had claimed my worth, named my truth, established a boundary that would forever alter my relationship with my parents. Or perhaps more accurately, I had acknowledged the true nature of a relationship that had been broken long before I found the courage to say it aloud. The calls began the next day. My mother, sobbing into the phone about betrayal and family loyalty. My father, alternating between threats and appeals to my sense of duty. My aunt, recruited to tell me how selfish I was being. How my parents had sacrificed everything for me. I let the calls go to voicemail. I listened to each message once, noted the emotional manipulation tactics, and deleted them. I didn't block their numbers. That felt like another kind of avoidance. Instead, I simply chose not to engage. 2 weeks after my father's initial call, a certified letter arrived from their attorney, demanding repayment of the college fund as an interest-free loan that had now come due. I forwarded it to a lawyer recommended by a colleague, who responded with copies of my grandparents' will specifying the educational trust and its terms. That was the last direct communication from my parents. The silence returned, but now it was different. Now it was my choice, not theirs. As autumn turned to winter, I settled into my new life. I joined a rock climbing gym, making friends who knew nothing of my history. I excelled at work, earning a small bonus that I used to take a weekend trip to the Grand Canyon, my first vacation that wasn't tied to school breaks or family obligations. I started therapy, beginning the slow process of untangling my sense of self from the distorted expectations my parents had imposed. I learned to identify the critical inner voice that sounded suspiciously like my mother. I practiced saying no without justification and yes without guilt. On Christmas Day, I volunteered at a local shelter, serving meals to people experiencing homelessness. One elderly man reminded me of my grandfather, with the same kind eyes and gentle manner. He told me about his daughter, a doctor in Chicago, and the grandchildren he hadn't seen in years due to family estrangement. Do you miss them? I asked, refilling his coffee cup. Every day, he said, his smile sad but genuine. but I'm proud of her for making her own way. That's what parents are supposed to want for their children. You know, for them to become their own people, even if that path leads away from us. I thought about that conversation for days afterward. About the difference between love that constrains and love that liberates. About the courage it takes to let someone go so they can become who they're meant to be. I couldn't change my parents, couldn't make them understand that their control had never been love, that their financial demands had never been fair, that their rejection had been a gift disguised as punishment. But I could change how their actions affected me, could choose to see their limitations with compassion rather than resentment, could build a life rich in the very things they had never been able to give me: unconditional acceptance, genuine support, joyful celebration of achievement. As the new year began, I opened a savings account specifically for a down payment on my own home someday. I named it New Roots. Each month, I transferred the exact amount I used to send for my parents' mortgage, $1, $450 toward my future instead of their past. It wasn't forgiveness exactly. I wasn't ready for that. But it was something equally powerful. It was reclamation of my resources, my energy, my right to prioritize my own well-being. 6 months after graduation, I received an unexpected package. Inside was my graduation cap, the one that had fallen when my father delivered his verdict. With it was a note from Professor Harlow, my senior project advisor. "Emma, I found this after the ceremony. I've held on to it, hoping to return it to you personally, but I'm glad to hear you've moved on to exciting new opportunities. Remember what I always told you. Engineers don't just solve problems. They build foundations for others to stand on. You've built yours with exceptional skill and integrity. I can't wait to see what you create next." I hung the cap on my wall, not as a reminder of rejection, but as evidence of resilience, of endings that become beginnings, of the foundations we build for ourselves when others fail to support us. The mortgage payments never resumed. My parents never apologized. But slowly, steadily, I built a life that didn't require either to be complete. The yearly performance review landed in my inbox exactly 15 months after graduation day. Outside my office window, Phoenix shimmered in October heat, the mountains hazy in the distance. I scanned the document twice, not quite believing what I was seeing. Emma has exceeded expectations in all areas, demonstrated exceptional problem-solving abilities, contributed significantly to the Thompson River project, recommended for promotion to junior project engineer with corresponding salary increase. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitating before typing my acceptance. Old habits surface like sea creatures from deep water. The instinct to shrink my success, to downplay my achievements, to apologize for taking up space. For a moment, I could hear my mother's voice. "Don't get too full of yourself. Nobody likes a show-off." I pushed the thought away and clicked accept. The promotion came with an $8,000 salary increase. I opened my budget spreadsheet and adjusted the numbers, allocating the additional income to my New Roots Home Savings Fund and a new category labeled Professional Development. No guilt, no hesitation, no mortgage payments to my parents. That evening, my phone vibrated with a text message from an unknown number. I opened it warily, half expecting another family member recruited to pressure me about the mortgage. "Is this Emma Prescott? It's Lizzie Harlow, Professor Harlow's daughter. I hope it's okay that Dad gave me your number. I just moved to Phoenix for work and don't know anyone here. Would love to grab coffee if you're free." I stared at the message, equal parts surprised and suspicious. Was this a coincidence? Or another manipulation? Professor Harlow had been my greatest advocate at university, but I hadn't spoken to him since receiving the package with my graduation cap. I typed a cautious response. "Hi, Lizzie. Yes, this is Emma. Coffee sounds great. When works for you?" We arranged to meet at a local cafe that weekend. I arrived early, claiming a corner table with good sightlines to both the entrance and the exit, a habit I'd developed in childhood, always watching for the shifts in my parents, moods that signaled danger. Lizzie arrived exactly on time, a tall woman with her father's kind eyes and quick smile. "Emma, I'd know you anywhere. Dad has your senior project framed in his office." She extended her hand. "Thanks for meeting me. I was worried you might think this was weird." "A little," I admitted, relaxing slightly. "But your dad was important to me." "It's nice to meet you." We ordered coffee and fell into easy conversation. Lizzie had accepted a position with an environmental nonprofit, focusing on water conservation in the Southwest. She was passionate, articulate, and refreshingly straightforward, qualities I'd come to value after years of navigating my parents' emotional minefields. "Dad talks about you a lot," she said after we'd covered the basics. "Says you're one of the most talented students he's ever had." I felt heat rise to my cheeks. He was an incredible mentor. He also mentioned things were rough with your family. Lizzie's direct approach caught me off guard. "Sorry if that's overstepping. Dad doesn't usually discuss his students' personal lives, but he was really concerned after your graduation." I traced the rim of my coffee cup, considering how to respond. I'd spent so long compartmentalizing my family situation, keeping it hidden like a shameful secret. But here was someone who already knew part of the story, who wasn't asking for details out of morbid curiosity, but from a place of genuine concern. "My parents and I aren't in contact anymore," I said finally. "It's complicated, but it's also better this way." Lizzie nodded, not pushing for more. "Family stuff usually is complicated. My mom left when I was 12. Haven't heard from her since. Dad raised me on his own." "I didn't know that," I said. "Professor Harlow never mentioned it." "He wouldn't. He's pretty protective of our privacy." She smiled. "But he also taught me that sometimes sharing your story helps other people feel less alone in theirs." Something in her simple acceptance cracked open a door I'd kept firmly shut. For the first time, I found myself telling someone the whole truth. About the mortgage payments, the graduation day rejection, the months of manipulation that followed my decision to stop enabling my parents' financial dependence. Lizzie listened without interruption, without judgment, without the uncomfortable pity I'd feared. When I finished, she said simply, "You did the right thing, not just for you, but for them too." "For them?" I echoed, surprised. "Absolutely. Enabling someone to remain dependent isn't actually helping them. It's just postponing the inevitable reckoning with reality." She leaned forward. "My dad would call it false kindness. When you do something that feels kind in the moment, but actually prevents necessary growth." The concept resonated deeply. How many times had I justified my financial sacrifice as kindness, as duty, as love? How long had I confused self-erasure with generosity? "I'm still figuring out who I am without them," I admitted. "Without the obligation, without the guilt. Sometimes it feels like I'm meeting myself for the first time." "That's the best kind of meeting," Lizzie said with a grin. "First impressions matter. Be kind to the new Emma." We parted with plans to meet again the following week. Walking home in the golden afternoon light, I felt lighter than I had in months, not because I'd unloaded my story, but because I'd been heard without being diminished, seen without being judged. The simple power of authentic connection reminded me of everything I'd been missing, while pouring my energy into a relationship that demanded constant self-betrayal. That night, I opened my journal and wrote, "False kindness versus true kindness. One keeps people small. The other makes room for growth, even when that growth is painful." The promotion changed more than my salary. Suddenly, I was invited to client meetings, included in strategic planning sessions, trusted with greater responsibility. My voice, so carefully modulated for years to avoid triggering my parents' insecurities, was valued, sought after, amplified. At first, it terrified me. Each time I offered an opinion in a meeting, I braced for backlash. Each time I submitted a report, I prepared elaborate defenses for my methodology. Each time I received praise, I deflected it automatically, redirecting credit to others. My team lead, Marissa, pulled me aside after a particularly successful presentation. "Emma, can I give you some feedback?" My stomach dropped. Here it comes, I thought. The criticism, the disappointment, the reminder that I'm not enough. "You need to stop apologizing for your brilliance," Marissa said bluntly. "Twice today you prefaced excellent insights with, 'This might be stupid, but,' and 3 times you gave credit to someone else for your own work." I stared at her, speechless. "Look, I don't know what happened to make you think your ideas need qualifiers, but in this office, we value direct communication. If you have a solution, share it. Own it. Stop waiting for permission to be good at your job." Her words followed me home, echoing in my mind as I made dinner in my small kitchen. Stop waiting for permission to be good at your job. Stop waiting for permission to exist. Stop waiting for permission. The next morning, I received an email about the company's professional development program. Employees could apply for funding to attend conferences, workshops, or additional training relevant to their positions. The deadline was that Friday. In the past, I would have dismissed the opportunity automatically. Too expensive. Too self-indulgent. Too visible. But Marissa's words had taken root overnight, sprouting possibilities I'd never allowed myself to consider. I researched engineering conferences, finding one in Denver focused on sustainable infrastructure, directly relevant to my work on the Thompson River project. The registration fee was steep, the travel expenses significant, but the potential professional benefits were undeniable. My finger hovered over the application link, the familiar hesitation surfacing. What would my parents say about such an extravagance? The thought arrived unbidden, reflexive, followed immediately by the liberating realization. It doesn't matter what they would say. They're not paying for it. I am. I completed the application in one decisive burst, attaching a clear justification for how the conference would benefit both my professional development and the company's objectives. Then I closed my laptop and went to work, refusing to second-guess my decision. 3 days later, I received approval. Not just for the conference registration, but for all associated travel expenses. Your application was exemplary, my department head wrote. We're fortunate to have team members who take such initiative. That weekend, Lizzie and I met for a hike in the nearby mountains. The November air was crisp, but not cold, perfect for physical exertion. As we climbed, I told her about the conference, about Marissa's feedback, about the small revolution taking place inside me. It's like I've been living with the parking brake on, I explained, pausing to take a drink from my water bottle. Everything required so much more effort than it should have. And now? Lizzie prompted, her breathing steady despite the incline. Now I'm learning to release it. To stop fighting myself. To use all the energy I was wasting on guilt and fear for things that actually matter. We reached a plateau with a stunning view of the valley below. Phoenix spread out like a geometric pattern, the city grid intersected by highways and canals, bordered by mountains on all sides. From this height, I could see both where I'd come from and the vast possibilities stretching before me. My dad would love this analogy, Lizzie said, snapping a photo with her phone. He's always talking about perspective, how climbing higher helps you see the whole system instead of just your part in it. Professor Harlow was big on systems thinking. I agreed, remembering his lectures on how individual components interact to create outcomes greater than the sum of their parts. He taught me that changing one element can transform the entire system. Like removing yourself from a toxic family dynamic, Lizzie observed. Exactly like that. I took another drink of water. I keep waiting for the guilt to crush me, for the consequences to catch up with me. But it's been over a year, and I'm still standing. More than standing, I'm thriving. That's the thing about unhealthy systems, Lizzie said thoughtfully. They convince you they're essential to your survival, when actually they're draining your life force. Getting free feels terrifying, until you realize how much energy you have without them siphoning it away. We sat in companionable silence, watching hawks circle on thermal currents, their movements effortless, guided by instinct and air. I thought about all the unnecessary weight I'd carried for so long. The constant anxiety of my parents, approval, the crushing obligation of the mortgage payments, the exhausting vigilance required to navigate their emotional landmines. I never thought I could just walk away. I admitted, I always believed I was responsible for their happiness, their financial security, their well-being, that without me, they would collapse. And have they? Lizzie asked gently. I don't know, I realized. I haven't checked. Haven't driven by the house. Haven't asked mutual acquaintances. Haven't Googled them. It's like once I broke the connection, I stopped needing to know. That's healthy, Lizzie assured me. Their lives are their responsibility now, just as yours is yours. On the hike back down, we talked about lighter things. A new restaurant Lizzie wanted to try, a movie we both wanted to see, plans for the upcoming holidays. For the first time, I felt the possibility of chosen family, of connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation. of friendships that enhanced rather than depleted. The Denver conference arrived faster than expected. I packed carefully, including the new business casual attire I'd purchased, with part of my promotion bonus. Professional clothes that fit properly, that made me feel confident rather than apologetic for taking up space. A small luxury that would have been impossible during my mortgage-paying years. The conference itself was transformative. 3 days of cutting-edge presentations, networking opportunities, and hands-on workshops. I took detailed notes, asked thoughtful questions, exchanged contact information with engineers from across the country. In the evenings, I joined groups for dinner, contributing to conversations without diminishing myself, sharing ideas without preemptive apologies. On the final day, during a panel discussion on community engagement in infrastructure projects, the moderator opened the floor for questions. I raised my hand before I could talk myself out of it. Emma Prescott, Westbrook Engineering. I introduced myself, my voice clear and steady. I'm curious how your team addressed the initial resistance from local businesses during the planning phase. We're facing similar challenges with our Thompson River project. The panelists' response was thorough, insightful, directly applicable to the issues we'd been grappling with back in Phoenix. As she spoke, I noticed other attendees nodding in recognition of a common challenge, several turning to look at me with professional interest. After the session, a woman approached me, extending her business card. "Great question," she said. "I'm Diane Mercer, Regional Director at Caldwell Infrastructure. We should talk about your Thompson River project. We've had success with similar community dynamics in Tucson." I accepted her card, offering mine in return. "I'd like that. Our team is always looking for effective engagement strategies." "Actually," Diane said, "we're also looking for talented engineers with community perspective. Would you be open to hearing about opportunities at Caldwell? Your question showed exactly the kind of thinking we value." The old Emma would have deflected, diminished, deferred, would have said something self-deprecating to dispel the unexpected validation. Would have worried about being perceived as disloyal to Westbrook, about being too ambitious, about reaching beyond what she deserved. Instead, I smiled and said, "I'm happy at Westbrook right now, but I'm always interested in learning about innovative firms in this space. Why don't we start with coffee and see where the conversation leads?" We exchanged contact information, and I walked away feeling a new kind of confidence. Not the desperate relief of having dodged criticism, but the steady assurance of knowing my own value in a professional context. That evening, I called Lizzie from my hotel room, eager to share the day's experiences. "I got recruited," I told her, still slightly disbelieving, "by Caldwell Infrastructure. They're industry leaders in sustainable design." "Emma, that's amazing!" Lizzie's enthusiasm radiated through the phone. "Are you going to pursue it?" "I'm not sure," I admitted. "I'm learning so much at Westbrook, and they've been good to me. But it's nice to know I have options, that I'm valued beyond just one context." "That's the thing about breaking free from people who diminish you," Lizzie said. "You start to see your own worth reflected in how others respond to you. It creates this positive feedback loop." After we hung up, I stood by the hotel window, looking out at Denver's skyline. A year and a half ago, I'd been a new graduate, rejected by my family, making mortgage payments I couldn't afford, doubting every decision. Now I was a respected engineer, with a promotion, a savings account, professional opportunities, and genuine friendship. Not because I'd become someone different, but because I'd stopped hiding who I'd always been. The final morning of the conference, I checked my email before heading to the closing keynote. Among the usual work messages was one that made my heart stutter, from my mother, sent to my personal account. Subject: Important family matter, Emma. Your father has had a health scare. Nothing critical, but it's made us reevaluate some things. We'd like to speak with you. Please call when you can. Mom? No mention of the mortgage, no acknowledgement of their rejection at graduation. No apology for the months of manipulation, the legal threats, the emotional blackmail. Just the assumption that I would drop everything at the vague mention of a health scare, that family obligation would override all the boundaries I'd established. I read the email 3 times, searching for the emotional hook that would have once snagged me instantly. The guilt trigger, the fear button, the shame lever. To my surprise, I felt none of the expected reactions. Not anger, not anxiety, not the familiar rush to accommodate. Just a calm clarity about who I was and what I deserved. I closed the email without responding and went to the keynote address. Later, I would decide how, or whether, to engage with this attempted contact. But in that moment, I chose to remain present for the culmination of a professional opportunity I'd earned through my own merit. The keynote speaker was a renowned civil engineer whose work had transformed urban infrastructure in water-stressed regions. Her presentation was compelling, her expertise evident, her passion infectious. But what struck me most was something she said during the Q&A session. "Engineering isn't just about building structures," she explained. "It's about creating systems that support human dignity, that allow people to meet their needs without compromising their values. That's the true measure of sustainable design." I wrote the words in my notebook, underlining them twice. Systems that support human dignity. Wasn't that exactly what I'd been building in my personal life? A system that supported my dignity, that allowed me to meet my needs without compromising my values? On the flight home to Phoenix, I drafted a response to my mother's email. Not from a place of reactivity or defensiveness, but from the centered clarity I'd been cultivating since cutting financial ties. "Mom, I'm sorry to hear about Dad's health concerns. I hope he receives good care and recovers fully. Regarding speaking with you both, I'm open to a conversation under the following conditions: an acknowledgement of the hurtful things said at my graduation, an apology for the legal threats regarding my college fund, respect for my decision regarding the mortgage payments. If you're willing to meet these conditions, we can arrange a phone call. If not, I wish you both well, but will continue maintaining the boundaries I've established for my own well-being." Emma, I saved the draft but didn't send it immediately. Instead, I allowed myself the space to sit with it, to ensure it truly reflected my needs, rather than an instinctive response to their outreach. The plane touched down in Phoenix as the sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of gold and purple. I collected my luggage and headed home, my mind full of new ideas from the conference, new possibilities for my career, new appreciation for how far I'd come. As I unlocked my apartment door, I was struck by the feeling of returning to a space that was genuinely mine, not just physically, but emotionally. A home where I could be fully myself, without apology, without restriction, without constant vigilance. I set my suitcase down and opened the balcony door, letting in the cool evening air. My phone buzzed with a text from Lizzie. "Welcome back! Dinner tomorrow to hear all about Denver?" I smiled and replied, "Absolutely, so much to tell you." Then I opened my laptop, reviewed the email to my mother one more time, and pressed send. Whatever their response or lack thereof, I was ready. Not because I had all the answers, but because I finally understood the most important question: what kind of life did I want to build for myself? And for the first time, I was constructing that life without apology, without permission, without the crushing weight of obligations that had never been mine to carry. 3 months after sending that email to my mother, I still hadn't received a response. December had melted into January, and January had given way to February. Phoenix winters were mild compared to many places, but the desert nights carried a chill that reminded me of home, or what had once been home. I was finalizing a presentation for the Thompson River project when my office phone rang, an unfamiliar number with my hometown area code. My pulse quickened as I answered. Emma Prescott speaking. "Emma? It's Aunt Sylvia, my father's younger sister. We'd never been close, but she'd always been kinder than most of my relatives. Sending graduation cards, remembering my birthdays with small gifts, staying neutral during family conflicts." "Aunt Sylvia," I said, surprised. "Is everything okay?" Her sigh carried through the phone line. "Your father had a heart attack last night. He's stable, but they're keeping him at Memorial for observation." The news landed like a physical blow, not because of any lingering emotional attachment, but because of the sheer gravity of mortality. My father, the man whose approval I'd sought for decades, whose financial demands had shaped my early adulthood, whose rejection had ultimately set me free, was suddenly undeniably human, vulnerable, mortal. "I see," I managed. Thank you for letting me know. He's asking for you, Aunt Sylvia continued. I know things have been difficult between you all, but he seems genuinely remorseful, Emma. Maybe this is a chance to heal some wounds. I closed my eyes, centering myself in the present moment, in my office at Westbrook, surrounded by evidence of the life I'd built since walking away from their manipulation. The promotion certificate on the wall, the plant Lizzie had given me as a housewarming gift, the conference photos of me with industry leaders. I'm not sure that's possible, I said carefully. But I appreciate the information. Is Mom with him? Yes, she's barely left his side. Aunt Sylvia paused. She mentioned you hadn't responded to her email about his health concerns. I did respond, I corrected gently. I laid out conditions for reopening communication. She chose not to meet them. Another pause, longer this time. I see. Well, I felt you should know about the heart attack, regardless. He's in room 412 if you decide to call or visit. After we hung up, I sat motionless at my desk, letting the emotions wash through me. Concern, resentment, guilt, resolve, all tangled together like roots beneath disturbed soil. My father was ill, possibly seriously so. The daughter I had been raised to be would drop everything, board the next flight home, resume my role as family caretaker without question or condition. But I wasn't that daughter anymore. I finished my workday, completed my presentation, attended a team meeting about upcoming project milestones. When I finally left the office, the setting sun painted the mountains in shades of rose and gold. I called Lizzie from my car. My father had a heart attack, I said without preamble. He's stable, but he's asking for me. Oh, Emma, I'm so sorry. Her voice was warm with genuine concern. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, I admitted. Part of me wants to maintain the boundaries I've established. Another part feels guilty for not rushing to his bedside. Those feelings make sense, Lizzie said. Both of them? What does your gut tell you? I considered the question as I navigated evening traffic. What did my instincts? Not my conditioning, not my guilt, but my true inner guidance. Tell me about this situation, that this could be a genuine opportunity for change, I said slowly, or it could be another manipulation tactic. Either way, I need to approach it on my terms, not theirs. That sounds right to me, Lizzie agreed. Whatever you decide, I'm here for you. That evening, I called the hospital and asked to be connected to room 412. My mother answered on the third ring, her voice thin with exhaustion. Hello? Mom, it's Emma. Aunt Sylvia told me about Dad's heart attack. Silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken words. Then, he's sleeping now. The doctors say he'll recover, but he needs to make significant lifestyle changes. I'm glad he's stable, I said, surprised to find I meant it. Whatever had happened between us, I didn't wish him physical suffering. Are you coming home? The question hung in the air, layered with expectation and history. No, I said quietly. I'm not, but I am willing to talk, if you're ready to acknowledge what I wrote in my email. About graduation day, about the legal threats, about the mortgage. Her breath caught audibly. Is this really the time for that, Emma? Your father is in the hospital. He could have died. It's precisely the time, I countered, keeping my voice level. Life is fragile. If we want to repair this relationship, we need to start with honesty. You always were stubborn, she muttered, a familiar deflection tactic. It's not stubbornness, Mom. It's self-respect. I deserve acknowledgement of how I was treated. If that's not possible, then we have nothing more to discuss. Another silence, this one crackling with tension. Finally, she sighed. What do you want me to say, Emma? That we were wrong? Fine. We were wrong. Is that enough for you? The dismissive tone, the minimization, the implication that my boundaries were unreasonable? It was all so familiar. Nothing had changed, despite the medical crisis. They were still incapable of genuine accountability. No, I said simply, it's not enough. When you're ready for a real conversation, you have my number. I ended the call before she could respond. That night, I sat on my balcony under a blanket of stars, thinking about family legacies. What we inherit, what we perpetuate, what we transform. My parents had given me life, shelter, education. They had also given me patterns of emotional manipulation, financial coercion, conditional love. I could acknowledge both truths without diminishing either. The next morning, I received a text message from an unknown number. "This is Dr. Reynolds at Memorial Hospital. Your father asked me to contact you directly. His condition has stabilized, but he's requesting a video call with you. Please let me know if this is possible." I verified the doctor's credentials through the hospital website before responding. "I can be available at 1 p.m. Arizona time. Please provide a secure link." At precisely 1 p.m., I connected to the video call from a private conference room at Westbrook. My father appeared on screen, propped up in a hospital bed, looking older and frailer than I remembered. The sight triggered an unexpected wave of compassion, quickly tempered by wariness. "Emma," he said, his voice rougher than I recalled, "thank you for agreeing to talk." "Of course," I replied neutrally. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a truck." He attempted a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "The doctors say I need triple bypass surgery, scheduled for tomorrow morning." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it. "I hope the surgery goes well." He nodded, looking away briefly before meeting my gaze through the screen. "Emma, I know we've hurt you. Your mother and I. At your graduation. Before that too." The admission seemed to physically pain him. I've had a lot of time to think, lying here, about what matters, about what I might regret if these had been my last days. I remained silent, watching him struggle with words that didn't come easily to a man who had always believed himself infallible. "The mortgage payments," he continued. "They were wrong. I convinced myself it was teaching you responsibility, but really, I was exploiting your sense of duty, using your college fund as leverage. I am ashamed of that now." The admission stunned me. In all our years of conflict, I had never once heard my father acknowledge wrongdoing so directly. "Why?" I asked, the question that had haunted me for years. "Why demand that from your own daughter?" He closed his eyes briefly, exhaustion evident in every line of his face. "Fear," he said finally. "Fear of aging without enough savings. Fear of losing the house where we raised you. Fear of being seen as a failure by my own father, even though he's been gone for 15 years. He sighed heavily. "None of that excuses what I did. But that's the truth." I absorbed his words, searching for the manipulation, the guilt trip, the hidden agenda. Found none. "Thank you for saying that," I said carefully. "It helps me understand." "I don't expect forgiveness," he continued, "but I would like a chance to be better. To be the father you deserved all along." He paused, visibly gathering strength. "Whether or not the surgery goes well tomorrow, I want you to know I'm proud of you, Emma. Of your education. Your career. Your courage in standing up to us when we were wrong." Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. I had spent so long believing I would never hear those words from him. "Dad," I began, unsure what would follow. "You don't need to decide anything now," he interrupted gently. "Just know that I would like to try again. On your terms. When you're ready. If you're ever ready." The call ended shortly after, my father's strength waning visibly. I sat in the conference room long after the screen went dark, processing what had just occurred. Not a miraculous transformation, not a fairy tale reconciliation, but perhaps the first honest conversation we'd had in my adult life. That evening, I called Aunt Sylvia for an update. The surgery was scheduled for 7 a.m. the next day. The prognosis was cautiously optimistic, but the procedure carried risks, as all major surgeries did. "He really has changed, Emma," she said tentatively. "Nearly dying has a way of clarifying what matters." "Maybe," I acknowledged, "but real change takes more than words. It takes consistent action over time." "You're right," she agreed, surprising me. "And you're entitled to your caution after everything that's happened. Just keep the door open a crack? That's all I'm asking." After we hung up, I opened my new Roots savings account and reviewed the balance, now over $25,000. Enough for a modest down payment in some areas of Phoenix. Each dollar represented a choice to invest in my future rather than subsidize my parents' past. Each dollar was a brick in the foundation of my independence. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider what reconciliation might look like, not a return to old patterns, but the creation of something new, a relationship between adults with clear boundaries, mutual respect, and acknowledged history, not erased or forgotten, but integrated into a more honest present. I didn't book a flight home, didn't send flowers to the hospital, didn't make promises I wasn't sure I could keep. Instead, I wrote an email to my father's hospital address to be delivered after his surgery. Dad, I'm thinking of you today and hoping for a successful surgery and smooth recovery. Our conversation yesterday meant a lot to me. Thank you for your honesty. It's a starting point. If nothing else, I don't know what our relationship will look like going forward. I need time to process everything that's happened between us, but I'm open to the possibility of something new, something healthier for both of us. Take care of yourself. Let me know when you're feeling stronger, and perhaps we can talk again. Emma, I hit send, released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, and went to bed. The next morning, I woke to a text from Marissa. Emergency meeting at 9 a.m. Thompson River Project. All hands required. At the office, chaos reigned. A major design flaw had been discovered in the river diversion system, one that could potentially undermine the entire project, if not addressed immediately. The team gathered around conference tables strewn with blueprints and environmental impact reports, faces tense with concern. We need a solution by end of day, the project director announced grimly. The client is already threatening to pull out. Ideas, people! I need ideas. I studied the plans, the error jumping out at me immediately, a miscalculation in water pressure during flash flood conditions. But the solution was less obvious. Conventional fixes would require starting from scratch, delaying the project by months and costing millions. As others debated increasingly desperate measures, my mind returned to a presentation I'd attended at the Denver conference, an innovative approach to watershed management that might be adaptable to our situation. It was untested in real-world conditions, but the theoretical models were promising. I might have something, I said, my voice cutting through the anxious chatter. Heads turned toward me, expressions ranging from skeptical to hopeful. For the next hour, I outlined my proposed solution, drawing on both the conference material and my own engineering expertise. The approach was unconventional but sound, addressing not just the immediate design flaw, but also improving the project's overall sustainability profile. When I finished, silence filled the room. Then the project director nodded slowly. It's innovative, risky but innovative, and honestly, it might be our only viable option given the timeline. I'll stake my reputation on it, I said, the words emerging with a confidence that would have been unimaginable 2 years earlier. Let me lead the redesign team. We can have preliminary models by tomorrow morning. The next 12 hours were a blur of calculations, simulations, and collaborative problem-solving. I coordinated efforts across departments, delegated tasks according to team members' strengths, and maintained a clear vision of the solution throughout. When doubt arose, I addressed it directly. When obstacles emerged, I found creative workarounds. At 3 a.m., we had a viable redesign that not only corrected the flaw, but actually improved the project's efficiency. By 9 a.m., we had presentation-ready models to show the client. By noon, the crisis had been averted, the client reassured, the project back on track. That was remarkable leadership, Emma, Marissa told me afterward, genuine admiration in her voice. Where did that come from? I considered the question, reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this moment. I guess I finally stopped worrying about failing and started focusing on succeeding, I said. That evening, exhausted but exhilarated, I checked my phone for the first time in over 24 hours. 3 missed calls from Aunt Sylvia. A text message. Surgery went well. He's in recovery. Asked about you. I felt a complex mix of relief, gratitude, and cautious optimism. My father would live, would have a chance to become the person he claimed to want to be, would have an opportunity to build a healthier relationship with me, if that was truly his desire, and I would have the chance to establish that relationship on my terms, from a position of strength rather than dependence. As I drove home through the Phoenix twilight, I reflected on the parallel trajectories of my professional and personal growth. Both had required me to recognize harmful patterns, to establish boundaries, to claim my own worth even when others questioned it. Both had demanded courage, resilience, and faith in my own judgment. Both were still unfolding, still evolving towards something stronger and more authentic. 6 months after my father's surgery, I closed on my first home, a modest but charming bungalow in a Phoenix neighborhood I'd fallen in love with. The down payment came entirely from my New Roots savings account, supplemented by a promotion bonus I'd received after the Thompson River crisis. No financial assistance from family, no strings attached, no compromises on my independence. The morning of closing, I received a package at my apartment. Inside was a handcrafted wooden sign reading Prescott in elegant letters, suitable for mounting beside a front door. A card accompanied it, written in my father's distinctive handwriting. "Emma, your aunt tells me you're buying your first home today. I'm proud of you for this milestone and for all you've accomplished. This sign is made from wood, reclaimed from your grandfather's workshop, the same place where you used to build those elaborate structures with blocks as a child. Even then, you are an engineer at heart. No pressure to display it, no expectations attached, just a small piece of family history that I thought might belong with you now, as you create your own." With admiration, Dad, I traced the letters with my fingertips, feeling the smooth texture of the polished wood. 2 years ago, such a gift would have come with unspoken demands, with a weight of obligation. Now, I could receive it simply as what it claimed to be, a gesture of support, a recognition of my achievement, a piece of shared history offered without expectation. After closing, Lizzie helped me move into the bungalow. We ordered pizza, drank champagne from coffee mugs because I hadn't unpacked the glassware yet, and collapsed exhausted on the living room floor amid half-assembled furniture. "So," Lizzie said, raising her mug in a toast, "to Emma Prescott, homeowner, engineer extraordinaire, woman who stopped paying her parents' mortgage and started building her own life instead." I clinked my mug against hers. "And to chosen family," I added. "To friends who see us clearly and love us anyway." That night, after Lizzie left, I stood in the quiet of my new home. My home, purchased with my money, decorated to my taste, governed by my rules. Through the window, I could see the desert stars, brilliant and vast above the city lights. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, about the graduation day rejection that had felt like an ending but had actually been a beginning, about the mortgage payments I'd stopped making and the boundaries I'd started enforcing, about the slow, tentative steps toward a new kind of relationship with my parents, one based on mutual respect rather than financial dependence. The next morning, I mounted the wooden Prescott sign beside my front door, not out of obligation, not to please anyone else, but because I chose to incorporate that piece of family history into my new beginning. To acknowledge where I came from without being defined by it. To recognize that even painful roots can nurture something beautiful, if given the right conditions to grow. 2 weeks later, I invited my parents to visit my new home. Not to stay, that boundary remained firm, but for an afternoon, to see the life I had built for myself. They accepted with a carefulness that suggested they understood the significance of the invitation. When they arrived, something in my father's eyes changed as he saw the wooden sign displayed prominently by my door. He didn't mention it, didn't claim credit, simply nodded once, as if confirming something to himself. The visit wasn't perfect. Old patterns surfaced in subtle ways. My mother's reflexive criticism of my decorating choices, my father's unsolicited financial advice. But when these moments arose, I addressed them directly, calmly, without the desperate need for approval that had once defined our interactions. "Mom, I'm happy with how I've decorated my home," I said simply when she questioned the color scheme in my kitchen. "This is my space, designed for my comfort." She blinked, startled by the gentle but firm boundary. Then, surprisingly, she nodded. "Of course it is. And it's lovely, Emma. It feels like you." As they prepared to leave, my father paused in the doorway. "The mortgage is paid off now," he said quietly. "Just so you know. We downsized to a smaller place that we can afford on our own. Should have done it years ago." I met his gaze, recognizing the statement for what it was. Not a bid for sympathy or forgiveness, but a simple acknowledgement of reality. Of progress. "I'm glad," I said honestly. "That sounds like a positive change for both of you." He nodded, something like respect in his eyes. "We're trying to make better choices these days. Better late than never, I suppose." After they left, I sat on my new porch swing as the desert sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The visit had been neither as difficult as I'd feared, nor as healing as I might have hoped. It was simply a step, one of many on a long path toward something different. Something healthier. Something chosen rather than imposed. I thought about the young woman who had stood frozen at her graduation as her parents walked away, who had made mortgage payments she couldn't afford, who had believed, deep down, that she deserved the rejection she received. She felt like a different person now, not because she had been replaced, but because she had been reclaimed, because she had stopped paying for a home where she wasn't welcome and started building one where she truly belonged. My phone chimed with a text from Lizzie. Survived the parental visit? Dinner tomorrow to debrief? I smiled and replied, survived and then some. Dinner sounds perfect. Then I sat in the growing twilight, listening to the desert wind, feeling the solid foundation beneath me, the one I had built, brick by brick, choice by choice, day by day. Not perfect, not complete, but undeniably mine. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.